Blair has made some radical suggestions about education. The former Prime Minister says, quote, "The present exam system is not equipping pupils for the world they will work and live in," and he thinks GCSEs and A-Levels should be scrapped. With the nation seeing an overall dip in GCSE results this year, could Blair be right? Joining me now to try and answer that, I'm happy to welcome academic and author Joanna Williams. Hi, Joanna. First off, I'm going to go straight in and ask, what do you make of Tony Blair's proposals?
I don't think they're very good. I mean, they seem to me to be a rehash of arguments that have been made time and again over the course of really the past 2, even 3 decades now. I'm really struggling to see anything new or anything original in what he's proposing. I think if it didn't have the name Tony Blair Institute behind them, I think we would be collectively rolling our eyes at what's being said here. I can only assume it's been given publicity because of Tony Blair's name. But I mean, this call to scrap exams, to focus more on skills for jobs that have not been invented yet, this is something which, like I say, just seems to be turned out every single year around this time of exams. But it's meaningless. You can't prepare children for jobs that have not been invented yet. I mean, we can't predict skills that people will need in 20, 30 years' time. But we do know that a really good, solid academic education will hold children put children in a good position for the rest of their lives, far better than kind of vacuous skills.
What do you make, though, of his view that, if we have this system where it's an exam-based system where you can sort of cram just at the end, whereas he's suggesting a continual assessment model, which is, he would claim was more rigorous because it encourages children to think critically and to have problem-solving skills and not just do like a rote learning test at the end of the year. Isn't there a point to that?
I think there's kind of half a point, but I actually think exams have got a lot to be said for them. And I think really the experiences of the past 3 years have proven that, because I think when we didn't have exams and we went over to teacher assessment, actually children really missed out on their education. And now we've got a lot of problems where we're having to, or the government's having to kind of negotiate down exam standards precisely because they became so inflated when exams weren't in use. The other thing that we saw from the past 2 years is without exams, it was actually the most privileged children. It was children from private schools who were more likely to have their results boosted. And the children who did less well from that system were kids from working class backgrounds, particularly in the north of England, and from poorer families. So I don't think it creates any level playing field. It actually bakes disadvantage into the system. But also the idea that you can kind of teach critical thinking in the abstract is an incredibly bizarre idea. You can't go into a classroom and just say, right, kids, we're all going to think critically today. It's actually from teaching knowledge. It's when you give children literature or teach them history that they've then got something to think critically about in relation to.
Oh, no, I agree with that entirely. I used to run a critical thinking course at A-level, and it was really rubbish, to be honest. I mean, because actually critical thinking needs to be baked into all lessons, every level of the curricula, doesn't it, really?
Absolutely. I mean, you start teaching children literature, for example, you can't help but teach critical thinking at the same time. As soon as you get children to read a book and then ask them what do they think about it, they're thinking critically. Where you don't get critical thinking is with this obsession with skills that we've got. If you say to children, okay, so the point of this lesson is to sit there and put random words into Google and to learn how to use a computer keyboard, there's no criticality in that. Your opportunities for really thinking critically and developing your intellectual powers are negligible.
So with that in mind, is there any room, do you think, for educational reform? Does the system need to change somehow? And if it's not Tony Blair's suggestions, what suggestions would you put forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so many problems with education at the moment. And I think the biggest problem of all is that schools, universities, exams have all actually, seems to me, become quite separate from education, from actually teaching people knowledge. And I think where that stems from is that we've actually kind of lost confidence in why we would teach children knowledge. If you look, so many universities now on their literature courses are dropping Shakespeare, dropping Jane Austen, dropping helping Charles Dickens, because they're kind of embarrassed to be associated with these writers who, well, they're white, and how could we possibly expect black children to be able to cope with reading an author who has white skin, which in and of itself is the most racist, insulting argument that you can possibly make. The brilliant thing about the likes of Shakespeare, Dickens, Jane Austen is that they're universal. All children can read these books and get something out of them. But because right at the very, very top of our education system, we've lost any sense of why we would do this. What's the whole point? Why would we want to teach knowledge? Why would we want to actually have some things that we think are worth passing on to the next generation? Then that trickles all the way down, and you get schools just seem to have lost their purpose.
Well, a lot to think about there. I hope the Department for Education is listening. Thanks so much, Joanna Williams. Really appreciate it.